I've been a front-end developer for, well, a few years now. And one thing that keeps changing is what does front-end actually mean? Honestly, I find myself writing full stack code pretty much every day. It's the regular, it's the new default, it's how things are. My tool of choice is Next.js, which is a meta framework on top of React, which is a library, but never mind that for now. The point is that this trend is not specific for Next or any other tool. This is something we can observe among all of the current frameworks and libraries within all of frontend. Okay, let's see how this looks in practice, the difference between writing pure front-end client-side logic and full-stack server-side, client-side all mixed together. We have a pretty standard starter Next.js repository in which we can actually write pure client-side React code. And we will be doing this in this client page component. So we do RFC to create our component. Let's name it something like client page. This will be fine. We need to use the use client directive, and Copilot actually being a bit helpful here, but we need to use this directive in order to tell Next.js that this will be a CSR or client-side rendered component. What we typically have on a page, well, is some content. Let me just include some very basic styling here because we're gonna display this as well. So let's go max with 7. Let me just turn on the a little helper, MX Auto, so we are centered. Let's have a display flex columns, items center, and a gap of 10 should be fine. So we can recognize the page when we look at it. Let's have an H1 on the top, and let's have a class name for this just to make it a bit bigger of text. Let's make it for Excel. We're good, and we're just gonna type here client side, if only I could type client side page. Okay, great. We have some text that will appear on the page just like this, but well, this is not enough for any kind of website. So what we need is some data that would most likely, or very likely, be fetched somewhere from the server side, like a database, a CMS, whichever. So we need to fetch it. Right, let's have a const, we'll call it response. And we're gonna use some placeholder data, but not like this because we want it to be, well, it needs to be asynchronous, but we want to use async await, not a promise, which is what Copilot wants us to use. So we're gonna await, and the rest of it Copilot should handle pretty well. It's even given us some comments to put in here. Now we are seeing an ESLint error here because, well, this won't work because the top level component isn't asynchronous, and we cannot make it asynchronous because it's client side. The top level components cannot be asynchronous within React. So we would need to use something like a use effect, because what we want is for this to be fetched, well, only when the page loads. Let's say this is a welcome screen when the user logs in, we need to show their name, their data, or we have an e-commerce application, we want to show a list of products, anything like that. So we would have a use effect, not use, that's a different thing. Use effect, and let it auto import. And I could type this all out, but Copilot is doing pretty well on its own, so I'm just gonna let it autofill and see if there's no problems. No, this is all looking good. Fetch data, pretty much what we would want to have. And now we can delete all this we had before. So this will not cause any errors. The page it's still working, but we still don't have our data. So to have it, we need to take this and we need to render it somewhere, somehow. But if we just try to render it here like this, well, it can't find it because this only exists within this function. Have a bit of an issue with closures here, so, and with function scope and all that. So we cannot access it. In order to access it in React, in the client-side component, we need to use state. So we would have something like this. We would have cons, and let's call it not date. Actually, okay, we can call it data. But just to be a bit safe with naming, not to be too confusing, we're going to name it a bit differently. So data to render, yes, and it's going to use state. Let's just import it. So use state, so we don't have any problems. And yeah, and it doesn't let us, it wants us to, okay, what Copilot tried to do here was to declare the any type. I have my ESLint or TS configured not to accept an explicit any, so long story short, this will work just with this, but we need to set this state variable somewhere, and we can just do it here. So set fetch data, and now we can show it. So data to render, and if it's there, yeah, a bit of a no, it's not gonna map it. What is this even doing? So if we have data to render, we will show the data to render, and we are missing something. Or is it just doing, yeah. This will most likely cause an error. Let me just, yeah, this does cause an error because this probably comes in like a JSON object. So let's just do something like this. Yeah, let's use JSON. Let's stringify this and let's close it right here and see what we get. And there we go. We have the rendered data right here. This is using, what is it fetching from here? JSON placeholder data. So if you just want to test or make a presentation like exactly in this example I'm doing right now, you can use placeholders like this. And when we refresh the page, we will see it popping up after a moment. Okay, and actually we don't need this check right here. This should be fine, just like this. Let's refresh it. Yeah, so while the data is being fetched, we are seeing null. Once it is fetched, we are seeing, well, the fetched content. This is not best practice, so commonly you would have a loading state for when this is happening. So you would have const, and Copilot knows exactly what we want to do because this is very, very common practice in client-side components, and you've seen it probably a million times yourself, like a loading spinner, loading text, whatever. That's what you need, especially on client-side. So here, once the data is fetched, we can set loading to false, and by default it's set to true. So you land on this page, it's loading, it's done loading. You can see your data, and we want to display this conditionally depending on the state of loading. So if it's loading, we want to show like a paragraph saying loading. That's all we want. And if it's not loading, we want to show our actual content. So now, fetch it. Yeah, we see loading, and loading is done. We see our content. Very simple snippet of code. We have two state variables. We have a use effect with an empty dependency array that will only execute on the first render, and we are showing the data. We're showing the data below. There are ways of getting around all this. You don't have to write so much code. You can use something like React Query, for example. There's many solutions you can employ here, but this is the standard quote-unquote way to write React code to render data on a client-side component. And moreover, you would probably need to use some other things because you don't want it to refresh the data when you go to a different page to change the route. You would most likely, you could utilize what I mentioned, which was a React Query. You would most likely have global state. You could have local storage, session storage. This could be this could have much more logic written in it, but the basic idea is here. Okay, now how can we replicate all of this in a server-side component? Well, it's very simple. First of all, RFC, which creates the basic template for our component. We're gonna remove the React import, which we do not need. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but why have code in your component that you don't need, right? I'm gonna call it the homepage, and we're calling it homepage because this will be in the root of our application. We're gonna borrow stuff from here just so we don't have to retype all the styling and such. We are missing the closing div tag. Always copy paste whenever you can. Remember, developers are very lazy people. If you can reuse your previous work, always do it. Export default, and what we can do here is make the top level function asynchronous, something we cannot do in a client level component. This is the first big plus. So sync, if I could only type sync, there we go. And now we can just type out asynchronous code. So we're gonna have const response is, and then I see Copilot is doing the job for us, which is amazing. Again, if you can leverage tools like this, always do. And we will need the console log, but we need to actually show our data. We're gonna follow the same approach as before. So we're gonna have a JSON stringify, and we're gonna take our data right here, and that's it. Now we can go to I think we did not update, we didn't update the h1, so server, just so we can tell the difference between the pages. We have the server-side page, and we go back, we have our client-side page. Now notice the difference. When you go to the client-side page, you have the loading state. Go to the server-side one, and there's no loading. Client-side, server-side. See, server-side, it's instant. It's there because all of this is being generated, rendered on the server. There is no operation that is being executed on the client side, which makes it faster. Not always faster, but makes it more seamless, and the user doesn't have to wait. It doesn't have to wait for the content to render. That's one thing. The other is, like, look how how little code we had to write to achieve this. We don't have to have a use effect and fetch the data inside and set the state, set the second state, then remember about the dependency array, then actually render it here depending on the state of loading. And again, this is a very simple component. There is nothing complicated here for any developer. This is very straightforward, but like I said, the example itself is meant to be simple. This can really grow out of hand pretty fast, and a lot of errors are caused by client-side logic, because you have to juggle local state, global state, session storage, global storage, all sorts of things, and display to the user what they should see at that given moment, which can depend on 20 other factors. Using a server-side component, you kind of avoid that level of complexity. You can still have a client-side component within a server-side one That's why this is a full stack solution, but well, you don't have to. You have more options. Right. Speaking of options, well, we want our page to be interactive. We don't want it to just show content when the user comes to it. So let's add a button. Let's add something that the user can interact with. We're going to do it both on the client component and on the server component. On the client side, well, this will be very straightforward. So let's just maybe put it in some kind of div, and we'll have a button with very minimal styling. Again, whatever Copilot wants to give us, this is fine. And we would assign an on-click function to it, and this would have something like, we can have a function here. So function, okay, handle click, but it's gonna do something else. It's gonna actually fetch the data. But we don't want it to fetch our data right here. I mean, we can fetch the same thing, but let's simulate it, or let's simulate something more complex. Let's say we want to get data from our database. Well, what do we do then? We would need to hit our API route, which would be in our backend. But within Next.js, we can have, well, our backend in the same repository. We can have API routes in the same place, in the same repo. We have our page components. And doing this within Next.js is very simple. All we need to do is, well, we're going to create an API route. We're going to ignore these errors for now. We're going to create this in the API folder. This does not exist by default, and it doesn't have to follow this structure, but it's kind of a best practice, a remnant of how Next.js used to be written. You would have the API route, and that's where your API functions would live. We continue that just for the clarity in the code. What is required is you need to name it route. You can name it whatever, the parent folder, and it will be available under this URL. So API/fetch from DB, and the route is going to be there. What we're going to have here is a get function. So export async again, Copilot. Let's see. Yeah, response. Yes. Okay, this is pretty good, but there will be a request. Okay, I'm not 100% happy with this, but let's see if Copilot can make this a bit better. So we would like to have a try and catch. So let's just tell it to wrap this in try and catch. Please remember to always add please when you ask AI to do something. That way, when the AI takes over, it will treat you kindly, hopefully. And there we go. And we want to get rid of this error. Since we're using Copilot, let's have it solve the problem it created in the first place. And we can also leverage this request here, so we can have something like if, let's say, if request method is not get, then we're gonna have a okay, yes, and this is a fully functioning API route. Just how you could have something like this within Node.js with Express or Next.js, you can have it directly in your repository in Next. And even though this is a very simple example, we are just fetching some placeholder data, this could just as well fetch data from the database in a completely secure way. I mean, we can have more checks, of course. Right now we're just checking the method, but we can have some authentication here as well. If you're using Clerk, Next.out, Superbase, Lucia, whatever for authentication, you can have that check here as well, and you can return. Okay, here we're returning method not allowed, but we can return unauthorized, forbidden, whatever. We can have full security over here, and again, all the logic that would communicate with our database would be rendered on the server, not on the client, not in the browser, completely secure. Right. Now, how do we get this data onto our client-side component? Well, in the exact same way as we would do this if it was a pure React application. We just need to hit the API route. Just in this case, the API route actually resides within our project. So what we do here, I think, okay, best if we make this asynchronous, I believe. Now we're gonna have, again, Copilot knows exactly what to do, but with some exception, because we don't want to replace our current data. Well, it's gonna be the same, but just for the sake of it, we want to have const data from the B, sounds good. And we want to display it below the button, so we're gonna have maybe let's have another div. Not the best semantic structure in this component, but that's not the point. Not a button. We want to have a data from DB. If data from DB, then we want to show, yes, we want to show JSON stringify data from DB, and we want to display something else here. First of all, we want this to be a paragraph, just for the sake of it, and we want to give some instruction to the user. So click button above to display, to fetch data. There we go, and here on click we're gonna have a function that's gonna, well, take the handle click, and we should be good. In case I forgot something, let's, oh yeah, we're not actually setting the correct data, so set data from DB, there we go, ESLint to the rescue. We click the button, and we miss something. Let me just see quickly. Yeah, I believe this needs to be an actual function. Let's see. Click me, and there we go. Our data is rendered, and just for clarity, I am going to comment out our data from the first render. Now we don't see it. Let's refresh the page. Click me, and our data just appears. Okay, great. But now, how do we do the same thing on the server-side component? Well, it's quite simple, but we cannot just do the exact same thing as on the client side, because if we just copy this here, this will not work, because you cannot have an onClick function on the server side. So what can you do? Well, you can have a client-side component as a child of the server-side one, and just do it like this. Over here, I already created a components folder with the component called client component. I know, not very imaginative, but it works. So all we need to do is have an RFC. Yeah, this works. We're gonna call it client component. And again, we don't need this React on the top. And over here, we're gonna do exactly what we are doing in our client component on the page level. So we are going to copy this here. So we're gonna take this, put it here. Actually, we're gonna take the entire thing because we want to show the entire data. So We're gonna just put it here, but we need to have some wrapper. We're just gonna use a fragment, not to, well, it doesn't really matter, but we don't want to inflate the DOM too much, the document object model, and we can just copy all our stuff from here. We're gonna have the data from DB. We're just gonna use state, so we're gonna just add the missing import from React. There we go. Handle click. It's also gonna be copied like this, and I believe that's all we needed. And now we just need to include this component within our server-side component. We do it like this. So we're gonna have the client component right here with one more addition. Yes, we forgot the crucial thing about, or I forgot the crucial thing about client components is the use client directive. And if I did everything right, this will just work when we go to our server-side component. We are in the client side one, go to the server side page. Again, we still have this text right here. So let me just get rid of this. And so we have a more clear picture. Let's comment this out. Yep. And server side, click me. There we go. It just works. So in essence, using a full stack framework like Next.js allows you to write code more securely with less complexity and write it faster, because you don't need to jump between some exterior backend repo written in Express or Nest. You can just access it all in one repository. But you might wonder, okay, why am I just focusing on Next.js? Maybe this is some just one edge case. There's 1,000 tools within front-end development. So what we can do is we can check the Stack Overflow developer survey for 2024, which is the latest one. Yeah, I have it open right here. And let's have a quick look. We are interested in technologies, most popular, and we will be looking at professional developers. Okay, first of all, JavaScript, the most popular coding language by far. This is the bottom layer, the closest to the metal as we get usually as front-end developers, and yeah, it's not going away anytime soon. Databases, not interesting for us at this moment. Cloud platforms, web frameworks and technologies. Now this is what we want. Professional developers, and we can see that React is king. It's on the top with anything that's supposed to compete with it, not even very close. We have Angular, which is half as popular as React is. We have Next.js, which is not competing with Angular. So Next.js is a meta framework on top of React, and it's almost as popular as, well, a different library. So we have React, Angular, and the third most popular is Vue.js. And yeah, and then they seem like they're competing with Next, which is not the case. Next is on top of React. So the closest competitor to Next actually would be something like SvelteKit, I think. And let's see if we can actually find, yeah. We have Nuxt at right here at 3.9%. So I think it's fair to say that sticking with Next.js or choosing Next.js as your framework of choice, meta framework of choice, it's a right call. We can go to the React homepage or the react.dev. We can check what do they recommend. And again, React itself, the most popular framework or library that exists. So again, React, pretty safe choice. And when you go to the docs, go to learn, basically a guide, how do you start with React. And let's see here, it would be, I think, in installation. Yeah, how do you get started with React app? So create new React app right here. And create new React app, there we go. Next.js. it is you can build it from scratch, but the number one recommended way is Next.js. Then you have React Router, which you can use in tandem with something like Vite or Vite, however you pronounce it. But doesn't change the fact that Next, and actually the latest version of Next, which is using the app router, is the number one recommended way to write React code. So to reiterate, if you're a front-end developer, first of all, you are using JavaScript because you don't really have a choice. Well, you should be using TypeScript, but that's a superset of JavaScript, so still qualifies. You should be using React because, again, if you want to get a job, or if you are already working as a front-end dev, well, most likely anywhere you go will be using React. If you are an employer or if you're a team leader and you're building a team, well, if you choose to use anything aside from React, well, you're not gonna have a very good or very easy time of finding developers. And then when you choose React, if you wanna choose a meta framework on top of that, and you should, in my opinion, then Next.js is pretty much a no-brainer. So what does this all mean? Well, from a business perspective, this means that companies will be looking for developers with more backend knowledge, whether they call it full stack or not. And you could make the very, very reasonable case that this has been a thing for quite a while now, but with full stack frameworks like Next or Remix, this will not go backwards. What this also means is that as developers, we need to kind of broaden our skills. We stopped writing just forms and buttons a long time ago, but now we need to handle data, and not only in state. We need to handle authentication and, well, to some extent, even server-side logic. It's key to remember that front-end development is not being replaced, it's evolving. With frameworks such as Next.js, the lines between front-end and full stack are becoming more and more blurred. But this does not mean that you should know everything. I think it's most important to tailor the tools you need to the project you're doing, to the specific needs of the application you're making or the team you're working with. Sometimes you might need to be more deep into the databases. Sometimes it can be authentication. Other times it might be internationalization, for example, which can be handled by middleware within Next.js. Examples just keep coming. And the bottom line is, it never hurts to broaden your skill set. With all that being said, I'm curious to know what you think. Are front-end developers becoming full stack by default, or is it more of a natural evolution of our tools? Please let me know in the comments. This has been my first video. If you found it helpful, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It would mean a lot to me, and see you next time.